I'm not a Trump supporter.
All right, good. I'm glad to hear that. Otherwise, I'd offer my condolences.
Let's keep an open mind here. Part of what I want to do is make sure we listen to the Trump supporters, and I'm trying to empathize with while I'm not one myself, I'm trying to empathize with where they're coming from, because I think if we don't understand where Trump supporters come from, then we've failed to learn the lesson of what happened when Trump got elected. So let's just keep an open mind to hearing their perspective, and have that be a focus for tonight. So sorry to jump in.
Okay, Garrett, we're doing introductions now, and how they're feeling, or how they feel about tonight's topic.
I just don't want anyone to feel alienated. That's why I spoke up.
Yeah, well, I'll just throw in. I think they should feel alienated. And 80 million actually is to the tune of that voted from last time. By the way, they're still looking. If any of you know where the 11,000 Georgian votes are, please let us all know.
Let's focus on doing the intros. But I'm glad we have a diversity of opinions. That's part of what being a free thinker is all about, is listening to a diverse set of opinions. So Kelly, why don't you go next?
So I'm Kelly. I'm calling from New Jersey. I didn't have all the education here, and I'm not really into politics here, but I'm not fond of Trump. But one of my dear friends, she's a really true, pro-Trump and Trump trooper. So I don't want to, build up my, logical reasoning why I don't like him. So whenever she says something, I'm kind of lacking of my logic. Okay? So I want to learn a lot from your perspective. I'm so sure most of the people who joined today is not really Trump supporter. I hope so. Okay, so I just want to learn a lot.
Great, and I hope we have both Trump supporters and non-Trump supporters, because that's how we learn the most, is hearing everybody's perspective. And that'll again be a focus for tonight, is to listen. I will be speaking for some time, but we're also going to do a lot of listening. So thanks for speaking up and sharing your perspective. Kelly.
Okay, I'll go next. My name is Michael, and no, I'm definitely not a Trump supporter. I, in fact, read the book written by his, I think, niece, about how my family created the most dangerous man in the world, and it definitely was not flattering learning how she wrote all of his books for him, and so yeah, that's
Interesting. I didn't know that she wrote his books for him. Thanks for sharing that. Thanks for sharing your perspective. James, you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. I don't know. I thought there was a guy that wrote his books, but maybe it was one of the books was written by a guy and somebody else wrote the rest. I get offended when people are kind of one-sided. In other words, bad people voted for this guy, good people voted for the other guy, or this guy is the worst person in the world, kind of thing. People have psychological types. There's like a lot of different psychological types. I understand I'm not from New York. I don't understand all the psychologies involved in New York City. That's special. It's not like any place else. But yeah, so that's all. I just I'm a Democrat. I go to meetings sometimes, and if there's a guy that wants all the sometimes there's a guy that wants all the, it's usually an older guy, but they want all the Republicans to die and so forth. Or they want when Trump was president, I remember there was a guy that hated Trump, but he was like he was the chairman. It was a big meeting, and he was the chairman of the meeting, and I thought that was really kind of like objectionable, because we for him to actually be hateful right. That's all. It just makes me upset when people express hate for someone. Anyway, that's all. But I'm interested in all views. I want to hear why people, how people feel about Trump and what the prospects are for the next election, because I have strong feelings about elections as an American. Thank you.
Great, thanks for sharing your perspective. And yeah, we're gonna try to keep a focus on listening. I've tried to listen to a lot of Trump supporters since Trump got elected to better understand things myself. And so I'll share what I've learned and what I think I've learned anyway. And Trump supporters can speak up and tell me if I'm wrong about their perspective. I only know the ones of the people I've heard. So Rashid, do you want to go next? Rashid, you're not connected to audio, so or we can't hear you. You are connected to audio, but we can't hear you.
Hello? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, go ahead. Much better.
Okay, great. So I was born in India, but I moved over to the US many years ago, and I've always thought Trump had a funny name.
Namaste, by the way.
Sorry?
I said namaste if you were born in India.
Namaste, namaste. Assalamu alaikum, actually. The part of India that I'm from is actually Arabic speaking.
Oh, salam.
Any salam. So I actually found out recently about Trump's book that he wrote, and I found it very interesting. I believe someone has mentioned it already in this meeting, but I I found that very interesting, and I've read it many times, and I just wanted to say that that's a good read to anyone out there. I've started work on an Arabic translation so I can spread his word around the world. Because wait, hang on, sorry, let me read this. Trump didn't really write that. There's a guy who wrote it for him. Oh, that might have been me. That might have been me, guys. Sorry. Okay, so I just wanted to say, yeah, I'm a big fan of that book, and I'd recommend it as a read to anyone. I'll pass it on to the next person now. Thank you.
Thanks. Cody's turn.
Yo, thanks. So obviously I've got a different perspective because I happen to reside in the UK, but obviously as regardless of the country, the efforts of the president or the person in charge does have an effect on the rest of the planet. So I do feel that I have a voice in the game. And this is my opinion on the whole thing. If you look at, now I'm not trying to put like a battle between England and America, but when you look at like people that we elect, and I'm not saying we got like, we haven't got corruption, right? But when you look at the people that are elected, stuff like education, like qualified, certified education in stuff like politics, for instance, ethics, the law, right? And these are like requirements to be like a politician, to run for the prime minister, ethics, politics, for some reason they put politics in the politics, and the law. And yet, not just Trump, but like a number of your presidents, like I recognize you got like an actor, a cow farmer, and then this billionaire mogul without any billions, right? And my biggest problem with that is, why don't you guys elect a president that has got qualifications, that have been to school and studied politics, ethics, and the law? This
study politics.
Yeah, politics is kind of necessary to run a country, and yet Trump, Bush, and the actor hadn't studied politics, law, or ethics, which is kind of like a fundamental for.
The actor was the governor of California. What are you talking about?
Okay. We're just doing introductions now.
Let's let Cody speak his perspective.
Get back to
You're welcome to write stuff in the chat if you want to respond, but right now we're just doing social to let people introduce themselves and their perspective. Anything else you wanted to say, Cody? Let's try to keep the intro short, but I hear you. And Fei Wu, and I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name.
Perfect. My name is Fei Wu. I'm Chinese living in London, UK. So I'm not a US citizen. I don't support any US president by voting. But I understand that Trump represents a group of people's interest. As someone else earlier said, people have different psychological types and also different intelligences. At least there are 9 kinds of knowing intelligence. And some of those some people in the US, they were born in unfortunate circumstances, so they couldn't do well due to either their different kinds of intelligences or their environments. So they couldn't do well in school, but they're very good with using their hands and bodies. When the Clinton administration allowed China to join WTO, because China was allowed to impose like 100% or 200% of customs duties on goods they imported from the Western nations, but the Western nations were not allowed to import any customs duties. Plus, Chinese labor was incredibly cheap in comparison to developing countries. So lots of industries shifted their their factories to China. And so lots of people in the US as a result don't have the fulfilling job opportunities. Plus the Democrats also encouraging unlimited immigrations. So people from Mexico or other parts of less developed worlds, they are willing to work on manufacturing jobs with at a much lower salary.
Thank you so much for all of that. We haven't started yet, but definitely raise your hand during our sharing session and continue on that. Garrett, is it about 7? Did you want to get started or?
Yeah, we'll let the last 2 people that have their hands up, and Ni Hao,
just
Ni Hao Fei
introduction.
Wu, and thank you for coming.
Sorry, I have just one
Yeah,
minute.
go ahead and finish one more thought.
So immigration makes also that group of people unable to find satisfying jobs without. We all know if we cannot be productive and we cannot produce, we are be unfulfilled. And Trump represented that group, those kinds of people. So that's a significant. That's a big voter base and people who are sympathize.
Yeah, we'll
sympathize for that kind of group of people.
Yeah,
that's why Trump got elected.
Great. And we'll go into the the offshoring conversation as part of the impetus for Trump supporters and immigration. So we'll cover that in the presentation portion, although there's a little bit of the stuff you touched on that I didn't focus on as much. But we'll touch on some of it and we can talk about the rest in the conversation. Kamana, go ahead. And thanks, Cody, to you too for coming in so late. I know it's late in Europe for both of you, the last 2 speakers. Kamana, go ahead.
Well, I'm Kamna. I live in the Washington, D.C. area. I actually have been very attuned to the political situation. I was a delegate at the Democratic Convention when Obama was elected. And I worked for the federal government. I was in a senior position during the Trump administration. So I saw the impact of his policies and how he works firsthand. So I have a lot to contribute, but I won't contribute right now since this is introductions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. I definitely would love your input in the conversation portion. And so looking forward to hearing what you have to say as an insider. So thanks for coming tonight. Archie, do you want to go next?
Yeah, hello, my name is Archie Neil.
Archie, you're on mute. That looked like it was coming from
Hello?
you. Yeah, go ahead.
Pretty, right? I like the tone. It's not a. I'm such an area.
Archie, are you there?
This is just her opinion.
Tandik, I don't know if you realize you're not on mute.
Archie, you're actually on mute right now.
Yeah, hello. My name is Archie. Sorry, my dog came in. I just really have like a connection with Trump. I met him in New York, on 2020, before the COVID. He told me that he doesn't like immigrants. And he tried to fight me. He tried to fight me.
Sorry, could you repeat that, please?
He tried to fight me. Donald Trump tried to fight me because he don't like immigrants.
You
Kinda
say he
sounds
tried
like
to fight
a
you, so
situation.
I think he said he tried
Like a
to fight
troll.
him because he doesn't like immigrants.
It kind of looks like a troll a little bit.
Tried to bite him.
Yeah, Archie, could you go on video because you're a little suspicious in terms of your presentation here.
Sounds like a reference to grab him by the.
So Archie, you can go on video in the next 10 seconds or you're going to get removed from the meeting.
I don't think I've got
What do you mean on video? What do you mean on video? Please tell me.
All right. So you had
Hello, this is video.
I'm pretty sure we had, I removed one so far. That's number 2. And then Marilyn is suspect. So Marilyn Kaplan. So we'll see. Keep an eye on Marilyn for co-hosts. We get a lot of trolls in Zoom meetings. What can I say? I feel bad for them. Imagine how bad your life has to be to troll a Zoom meeting. I mean, imagine how miserable these people are if this is what they do for fun. So I always offer them to coach them, but I forgot to do that tonight. I'll give them free coaching. I just feel bad for them. So I'm going to go ahead and go into the presentation for the evening. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
All right, great. So we're going to jump in. Basically a little bit.
Sorry, it's Alice. Before we get started, we have a lot of new people tonight. So if you check our chat, I put all the information about Freethinker Institute, as well as our Discord, online community, and meetup.
Great, thank you, Alice. And we do have actually remind me at the end of this evening, I'm going to do a quick 5-minute overview of Discord so that people can get an intro into how to stay in touch with the Freethinker community between these Tuesday night meetings. I guess I forgot, Alice, I don't remember if you sent me notes because I'm a little behind on my emails. No. So basically, I'll just tell you a little bit about the organization. The Freethinker Institute is a warm, open-minded community trying to help people with both personal and professional development to maximize happiness and minimize harm. We really want to help people be the best version of themselves seek truth and to be fair. And we want to make a world where everybody makes enough money that money no longer buys happiness, which in modern USD dollars is about 100K a year, according to some research. And we still want to create a meritocracy of wealth, but we want to create transformational personal and/or professional growth to achieve these things. And we really want to spread good ideas, which are ideas that maximize happiness and minimize harm. So the online community is done through software called Discord, or Discord, depending on how you pronounce it. And you can link to that and get a little more information about the organization with the website freethinkerinstitute.org. So with that said, that brief introduction to the organization, I guess a little bit of introduction for myself. I guess my name is Garrett Lang. I'm the executive director of the Freethinker Institute. I am a software developer turned software inventor turned entrepreneur. And my hobby is writing and discussing practical philosophy. And I've always felt doing good in the world is something that each one of us should put an effort in towards doing. And so starting the Freethinker Institute has been my effort at trying to do that. And so, yeah, this is these Tuesday evening sessions are really intended to teach about things that are not taught in academia or industry, so that people have another avenue for learning. Which I would argue is one of our purposes on this earth, is to learn as much as we can, both in terms of knowledge and wisdom. So that said, I'm going to go into the agenda. We're going to talk about a bunch of topics, and transphobia, homophobia. We're going to talk about racism and sexism. We're going to talk about how Trump appeals to honesty. And the first two will talk about Trump's relationship to both of those. And then we'll talk about fear of unemployment, which Fei Wei, I apologize if I remembered your name wrong because there's so many people. I can't see it on the screen. And I have a terrible memory. So mentioned is fear of unemployment, immigration concerns, and then we'll talk about tax benefits. And so I will argue that a good deal of Americans are homophobic, transphobic, racist, sexist, xenophobic, anti-immigrant, pro-ultra-wealthy, pro-working class, or some combination of these things. And a lot of these people feel that some of these attributes are very laudable values that should be celebrated and are not bad things, even though I think a lot of people have publicly shamed people with a lot of these beliefs for the last 40 years. And we'll talk about that approach. We're going to look at these in groups and sort of cover one at a time. I want to encourage everyone to keep an open mind to the conversation and to listening to the perspective of the Trump supporters in the room, especially, although I'm channeling what I've learned from Trump supporters chatting online and in person. Some of my good friends are Trump supporters. And people that I've learned quite a bit from in different areas of life. And it's really helped broaden my perspective to have good relationships with people with very different perspectives. And so that's part of what I'm trying to do with the Freethinker Institute, is to have people with different perspectives communicate more effectively with each other, especially to listen. And so we're going to try to focus on listening and using reason. I would argue we all have the ability to use reason, and that reason can lead us in really good directions. And so we're going to try to use reason rather than emotional arguments tonight. And to do that, we want to stay less emotionally charged, because this is a topic that very easily lends itself towards being very emotional. I could even see in the intros people getting emotional about this topic, and I do too. So I'm going to try hard not to tonight. But I think we should all try hard not to, because emotional reactions are usually suboptimal reactions, is a polite way of putting it. We make our best decisions, in my opinion, when we stick with the cerebrum, which is the reasonable part, the part of the brain that focuses on reason and logical arguments. And so we're going to try to focus on that this evening. So let's talk about homophobic, transphobic people in the US over the last 40 years. Mainstream society has often...
Every week,
I used a link that came in over a month. Oh, I'm so sorry, Garrett.
Ginny, that's okay.
I'm so
You're
sorry.
not
I
on
didn't know
mute.
my mic was on, Michael. I couldn't get in because I couldn't find today's meeting, and I finally found it.
Good. We're glad you made it. So for the last 40 years, mainstream society has basically publicly shamed people who are homophobic and transphobic. And that really meant that people who were homophobic and transphobic kind of kept their mouths shut around those people and sort of called those people politically correct with a very negative connotation, or woke also with a very negative connotation. And they often felt a lot of anger towards those people for shaming them, because no one likes to be shamed, no matter what your beliefs. And so they felt like these were very justifiable beliefs, and we'll talk about why in a little bit. Those people, from what I've gathered, have surrounded themselves with other people who agree with their beliefs, like-minded people who, basically hate, or often hate or largely dislike the people who shamed them, because again, no one likes to be shamed. And they recruited often people who were alone or felt lonely to be a part of this tribe of people who hate the common enemies, who were the woke people or the politically correct people. And then Trump came around and was fairly open about being, and I don't know how open, but there was definitely a sense of a signal that it's okay to be homophobic or transphobic from Trump's perspective. And that gave people a sense that they don't need to be ashamed anymore of those beliefs. And, he's a very wealthy, powerful person. And that gives them a sense of self-worth when they've been being publicly shamed for, sometimes the large part of their lives. And so I'm curious if this resonates with any of the Trump supporters. If you can write in the comments, I would love to hear whether or not this resonates with anyone, that sort of Trump kind of created a sense of self-worth for people who, were shaming you for your beliefs. Okay, so I got one person felt like they related. So feel free to share opinions. Again, there's no right and wrong here. There's just our opinions, and we want to listen to all opinions with an open mind. And ultimately, we have to use our own judgment to decide which opinions we're going to believe from a perspective. James, it doesn't make sense to you, but it does make sense to a lot of Trump supporters I've talked with. So it's good that it's fine that it doesn't resonate with you, and some of these things may and some of them may not, but not all of the things that I talk about are going to resonate with all of Trump supporters. You can't make so many broad generalizations that resonate with everybody. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide. And this kind of is an ad from Trump that sort of validates my perspective that I've learned from Trump supporters, which is, he said, "For those of you who have been wronged and betrayed, I am your retribution," right? I am the person who's going to right the wrongs that have been done to you, the people who have made you feel bad about yourself. I'm going to correct this. I'm going to be the guy that makes things right. And so, I guess I'm going to try a different approach, which is, if anyone, I'm going to try a logical approach to dealing with, the root cause of what I think is why a lot of people, basically are anti-homosexual, transphobic or homophobic. And basically, I think a lot of it comes from religious leaders basically saying that being gay is not right, being trans is not right, and that God doesn't like gay and trans people. But I would use sort of a logical argument and one that sort of appeals to the religious teachings of the founders of the two major religions that I think I'm aware of are fairly anti-homosexual and transsexual, which in Christianity's case, Christ said, "Love everyone, even your enemy." And then I would caution people, well, does that really mean that he also said, but hate gay people and trans people too? And I would argue probably not. That was probably not something that Christ taught or would even agree with. More likely that there were members of the church that came later. And we're going to hold questions till the end, Rashid. Although I am going to give Trump supporters a chance to speak up throughout the presentation, because I think like historically speaking, we've had less conservatives come to events. And so I'm going to give them a little bit more of a voice during the presentation, because today is a day to empathize with Trump supporters rather than and to try to understand their perspective. And clearly what I've said has not resonated with all of them, because one person has already said the first thing I said didn't resonate with them. But all I can do is say what I've learned from the people that I have interacted with. And that said, I'm going to continue. So I would argue that members of the church kind of inserted the homophobic and transphobic stuff later on, and the Bible was written after Christ died, so it was all later on, but that it wasn't really in the spirit of Christ's teaching. And then core to Islamic beliefs are compassion and mercy, and I would argue that, does that really mean compassion and mercy except to gay and trans people? I'd argue maybe not, and maybe that's, maybe there's some misunderstanding there too. And the other thing I would argue is that I've talked with a lot of gay and trans people, and I've asked them, did they choose to be gay or trans? And 100% of them, literally without exception, and this is many dozens of people that I've asked this question to, they all said they didn't choose to be the way they are. This is just how they were born, and they couldn't choose to be otherwise. And wouldn't their lives be so much easier if they did choose to be otherwise? And so why wouldn't they choose to be otherwise if they could? And I would also ask each of you to ask yourselves, do you choose your sexual preference? Like, do you choose whether you're straight, gay, or trans? And if you don't feel like you get to choose, then I would argue, let's empathize with the other people who also say they don't get to choose, who are gay and trans. And then the next logical argument is, if people were born that way and they can't control it, why would we think poorly of them for it if it's something that they can't control? Because that's really how God made them. If for those of us that believe in God, these people were born gay or trans, and therefore God made them that way. And even if you don't believe in God, then they were born that way and they can't control it anyway. So it still doesn't make logical sense, whether you believe in God or not, to treat people poorly because they're gay and trans. So that for me is like a logical reason not to be homophobic or transphobic. And again, like if anyone is still homophobic and transphobic after hearing that, I would welcome conversation in the discussion session about whether or not any of this resonates. So racism and sexism, similar, so I'm going to spend less time on it. If you look at Trump's cabinet, I'll show a picture of Trump's cabinet versus Obama's cabinet in the next slide. The diversity was sort of lacking in Trump's cabinet. It's mostly white men, almost exclusively white men, quite frankly. Old white men, to be clear. You kind of have to be on the older side to be in a position, get into that position of power for the most part, although there are some exceptions. And one of his strategic advisors was Steve Bannon, who's a pretty well-known white supremacist. Again, I would argue that people who were racist or sexist were told they were bad people for the last 40 years, and that sort of brought them into communities of people who agreed with that like-minded mindset and people who agreed with their values. And they kind of cordoned themselves off to people who agree with them and recruiting people who agree with them, and created an us versus them mentality, which, by the way, those of us who are not like-minded with that mentality often reinforce by trying to shame them for having those beliefs without listening to them with an open mind and understanding why do they have those beliefs in the first place. And that's why I started off this evening saying that I want to listen to people who have these beliefs, because maybe the people that I talk with aren't representative of the broader set of Trump supporters, although I have a reasonable sample size. But maybe we have other people here who have another opinion and perspective, and we want to welcome that perspective as well and engage in polite conversation about it. So, so this is a picture of Donald Trump's cabinet, versus Barack Obama's cabinet. You can see, more people of color, more women in Barack Obama's cabinet than you have in Trump's cabinet. So, and then let's talk about, again, similar to the logical approach on transphobia and homophobia, none of us choose our race, none of us choose our sex. And so I would argue it's sort of irrational to like or dislike someone because of race or sex alone. Like, we really need to judge people for who they are, their actions, their words, and whether their actions follow through with their words. If anyone can think of a good reason to dislike someone because of race or sex, and definitely raise your hand, and I'll take any comments about that. In the middle of the conversation, we normally hold questions till the end, but I do want to, like I said, give a perspective to people that can broaden our horizons on reasons that I haven't thought of, that my logical argument doesn't make sense or account for. Right, so I'm going to go to the next one. An appeal to honesty. I think all human beings have an inherent loyalty to truth. That's why the first intention of the Free Thinker Institute, which are our common values in the community, is to seek truth and be fair. I think we all have an inherent desire to be fair and a recognition of what is fair and what's not fair, as well as the desire to seek truth, and also to reward people who speak it. Now, Trump regularly speaks so negatively about certain people, and he says, well, that's just the truth, and I'm just blunt, and I'm really honest, and I'm really straightforward. And I think that appeals to people's desire, their innate desire to hear the truth. His truth happens to condemn people that his supporters don't like, and so it also feeds confirmation bias in addition to being very blunt. And so I'm curious whether or not any Trump supporters here actually like Trump because he speaks more honestly than most politicians do. Most politicians are generally pretty polite, and they're not so blunt. So I'm curious, especially for any of the Trump supporters, maybe just raise your hand if you agree that Trump speaking very plainly and colloquially resonates with you. So Rashid raised his hand. Anyone else? Got another hand raised. DLJ, Carly. So yeah, this seems to be resonating with a bunch of Trump supporters. And I guess, I have a potentially another insight, which is like if we go a little underneath and dig a little bit deeper beneath the surface, this helps Trump sort of appeal to being like the common man, right? But the truth is, Trump is not a common man. He was born extremely wealthy, and he's not like an average person. He was born so wealthy that even though if you look at Trump's accumulation of wealth, he's in the bottom 5% of wealth earners, but he's still very wealthy, although he does have a lot of debt, apparently. But he does he's not an average person, although his being kind of crude in his language does make him come across like an average, like guy on the street, or using foul language and calling someone horse face, and these sort of childish insults make him come across like a common man. But that's not really the type of life that he grew up in. The other thing is, I would recommend people fact check Trump, because Trump says that he does these insults on the basis of them being honest truth, but then I would also encourage people to look at who does he insult and who is he nice to. And it turns out, if you actually track this, he insults all the people who disagree with him, and he's very nice to everybody who agrees with him. And what that means is that he's going to surround himself with yes men who are going to say yes to him no matter what he says, even if he's wrong, because anyone who says that he's wrong is going to get insulted and get publicly humiliated on social media in front of millions of people, or have their careers ruined and be canceled, quite frankly. Trump is great at canceling people, which is ironic because a lot of Trump supporters say that Democrats have a cancel culture, but Trump is the king of canceling people. He ruins people's careers when they disagree with him. And that's the story, for those familiar with the childhood story of the Emperor with No Clothes. the emperor didn't want to hear anything. And so when he walked out without no clothes, like no one would tell him because no one wanted to challenge the emperor. And so Trump can come across that way because he doesn't want to hear anything other than that he's right. And none of us are perfect, and none of us are right 100% of the time. And Trump's no exception. And in fact, if you fact check Trump, and for those, most of the Trump supporters I know don't trust fact checkers. They say that the fact checkers are all politically liberal, although actually the Snopes founder was a conservative. Just a little factoid. But actually, if you look for politically unbiased sources using a tool called the media bias fact check, you can look for the media bias in media sources. And so if you look for media bias fact check and you look for media sources that are not extreme right-wing or largely right-wing sources that are reported as not being loyal to facts, and you try to look for sources that say that Trump's truths are actually true, I think you'll find that actually usually they're not actually true. And we're free thinkers here, so we can fact check ourselves. We don't have to rely on the fact checkers. We can do a lot of fact checking ourselves, and I would encourage people to do that, especially Trump supporters, but non-Trump supporters as well. If we don't want to feed our confirmation bias, I think it's good to do our own research. And so I would argue that if we dig a little bit deeper in the surface, this appeal towards honesty is actually not as honest as Trump wants to make himself seem. And you can find that out for yourselves by researching and digging deeper below the surface. So the next thing I want to talk about is low-skilled workers. And low skill is the wrong term, so I apologize. I didn't ignore the left. It's really hourly workers are the majority of Trump supporters, people who are not salaried. And so a lot of Trump's rhetoric says that immigrants are here to take your jobs. Fei Wei, if I remember her name right, and I apologize if I got it wrong, was talking about how a lot of jobs went overseas to China. A huge amount of manufacturing did go offshore, not only to China, but to a lot of other low-cost countries. And so Trump stoked that anger for people who had lost jobs from manufacturing jobs, from mining jobs, for mines running out of ore, or mines that are just no longer productive because they're not cost effective to run anymore, and so they got shut down. And Trump said he would prevent those immigrants from coming to the US and stealing those jobs, and bring back those coal mining jobs, which Trump said that he would. Well, it turns out, if we fact check this, there are some facts that actually do hold up to light. Trump did prevent immigrants from coming to the US to a large degree. His immigration policy was so harsh that he even separated children as young as 4 and 5 years old from their legal parents for multiple years, even those that were legal immigrants. And that was in an effort to scare away any families from immigrating to the US, because if you're afraid, like I have daughters that are 5 years old, if I thought that going to another country would mean I'd never see my kids for 4 or 5 years, there's no way in hell I'm going to go to that country. I love my kids like crazy. So that was a very effective deterrent at preventing people from immigrating. Some people, by the way, claim Obama did that. He did it for 2 to 3 days while he made sure that the parents were really the parents. And he checked that those were not people that were smuggling kids into the US, that were not actually the parents. And then once he found out they were the parents, he put them back together again. So there was some misinformation out there that I've learned about from discussions with Trump supporters, that after my fact checking, I learned, yes, Obama did separate parents from kids, but it was for 2 to 3 days, not 2 to 3 years or 3 to 4 years. And then while manufacturing jobs did go up 3 to 4% under Trump, mining jobs actually went down by over 9% under his presidency. So he did bring back some manufacturing jobs, so that he did manage to do, but the mining jobs went way down, and renewable energy is going way up because the cost effectiveness of renewable energy is going up. And I would argue that's actually a good thing, because if you look at the known sources of fossil fuels within this century, they're all planning to run out. Like the reserves of fossil fuels or are scheduled to run out in this century, given the increase of usage that's going on right now. And so, I think renewables are a good place to put our future bets. So let's,
excuse me.
if you have a question, Rashid, let's hold those till the end, unless it's something that you have if you're a Trump supporter and you want to share something that I've missed, you're welcome to share it.
Oh, no, it wasn't that. It was just that it was just relevant to the slide, but we can come back to it if you like.
Okay. If you don't mind, let's come back to it, and I can
Okay,
bring the
that's
slide
fine.
up again later if we need to.
Okay.
So let's look a little bit deeper still. The US has a declining population, and what that means is that there are a shrinking number of workers in the US. And so actually, without immigrants, our country wouldn't even be able to fill all the open positions required by businesses. So actually, immigrants are not really taking away the jobs of US citizens in general. They're actually filling jobs of companies that would not be able to hire the people that they need because there simply aren't enough US citizens of working age with that skill set to take those jobs. So actually, I think this fear of immigrants taking away all the jobs is really a misunderstanding about US demographics. The average US citizen couple has less than 2 kids, which means that we have a shrinking population. And so some of these demographics are not well known by Trump supporters, and the fact that there are all these open positions. Now, often the Trump supporters don't have the skills needed for these open positions. And so a real solution to this is actually giving job training to people who have lost their jobs in manufacturing or lost their jobs in the coal mines. And this is somewhere that Trump really did come through with one of his promises. He created job training programs in collaboration with industry to try to give people apprenticeships and training, and tried to empathize with the plight of people who were underskilled or don't have the skill set, a marketable skill set that they can make a good living with. The question of how effective those programs were was never really fully tested because of coronavirus. Things kind of got muddled, so I wasn't able to find good research on how effective those programs were because it was all kind of clouded by coronavirus. But if anyone has good sources on how effective those programs were, I would welcome feedback to that end. I couldn't find it. So another area is tax policy. So people making over $10 million a year donated in the billions of dollars to Trump and his causes in order to get Trump into positions of power and get even larger tax breaks as a result. This isn't the 1%ers. This is the top 1% of the top 1%. And the top 1% of the top 1% actually made 80% of the wealth of the top 1%, which is an interesting fact. And so it was in the ultra wealthy's best interest to donate to Trump because they saved more in taxes than the donations cost them. And they basically bought themselves a tax decrease. Now, the top 1%ers in general didn't have a significant savings under the Trump plan. Like everybody, there was ups and downs across all spectrum. But actually the low and middle class people that saved money will actually lose those savings in the next 5 to 10 years, whereas the ultra wealthy tax earners tax benefits will not really expire the same way that the lower income brackets folks tax benefits will expire. So that felt a little bit like an uneven playing field, where it was kind of give people something for a little while and then it's going to go away, which was interesting. So that said, if anyone that is a Trump supporter had reasons for supporting Trump, now we're going to go into questions and conversation. And I'd like to first start to ask the Trump supporters, if we could kind of give them priority. If there were reasons you like Trump that I didn't hit on, I would love to hear it. If people would be up for speaking up. So James, go ahead.
Yeah, I sort of wanted to mention first that people that might have supported Trump at one time, don't necessarily continue supporting Trump. You know, in other words, you could have like bought, I think in my family, one of my kids was interested in his games. We were watching him on TV. He was like a celebrity, like Ronald Reagan was a celebrity before he was president. So, but one of my kids we were kind of like, I think my wife watched his shows sometimes, not a lot, but and then one of my kids wanted to read his book, and you know, who's got a great career. She's done very well, and we bought the game for Christmas. He had a game out, which was terrible, but you know, that's par for the course, I guess. So, but so I sort of like just see him as kind of like a political phenomenon, something to do with the Republican Party. A lot of Republicans today are like Trump. The Trump style hasn't disappeared from the Republican Party. It's still as we know, it's still important undercurrent and minority in the Republican Party. The what do you call it? Make America Great Again contingent. But and I'm basically speaking as a Democrat, and as a person who's liberal. I liked his claim to want to destroy the American foreign policy. He wanted to stop wars. He wanted to stop our goings to wars, and he kept that promise by getting us out of Afghanistan. So just wanted to mention that's something that is political, a very important piece of political capital for Donald Trump, even though some people might not realize it, because it was Biden who actually was president when the troops came home, and then took some of the flack, you know, for here's another weak Democratic president that's discontinuing a 20-year war. He's a terrible person. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, James. And I do want to encourage the Trump supporters to speak first if we can. But James, I think it's a great point that a lot of people, Trump was very clever in that he did negotiate the exit of Afghanistan, but he negotiated it to happen after he left so that he wouldn't get in trouble for the, you know, it was always going to be bad. Like ever since we went into Afghanistan, we never had an exit strategy, and we still didn't when Biden pulled out, and that showed. And we lost all the ground that we gained in the 20 years we were there, much like happened in Iraq. And so, but that's a great point. Trump did not start any wars, so that actually was a very good thing. And so agree that, and I also noticed in the comments, and we need to address this, so hopefully someone will bring it up in the voice chat, is that Trump was not Hillary Clinton. A lot of people were very anti-Hillary Clinton. So I'd be curious, I know some of the folks whose hands up are not Trump supporters, and so it's okay to keep your hands up, but let me just ask, are any of the people whose hands up Trump supporters? Gary's got his physical hand up. Did you want to speak, Gary? You're on mute.
Okay. No, but I do have one thing positive to say, and I'm cringing as I say this. So there's a little positivity, and I think, is that what you want to call it? I'm obviously not a Trump supporter, but I will say one thing positive about him. Am I allowed?
Yeah, but if you don't mind, Gary, can you raise your hand for that? Because I want to actually have legitimate Trump supporters go first.
You're talking about
like,
this?
Like, sorry, like in the if you go to reactions at the bottom of the screen, you can do raise hand.
Gotcha.
Because we have a big line of people who are not Trump supporters.
All right. Go ahead.
I just want to see if there are any Trump supporters that want to speak up so that we can give them a voice first. Because I will say, like, there's this guy named Daryl Douglas. I forgot to add a slide on him. He convinced over 200 KKK members to not be racist. And he did it by listening carefully to why those people were racist and asking thoughtful questions that kind of led them to realize they actually didn't have good reasons for being racist. And once they realized that, they changed their minds and they were no longer racist. And so I like that strategy. And that's kind of what I want to do tonight as best we can with Trump supporters, is to hear, why do people support Trump? You know, I tried to, you know, take the arguments that I've heard from Trump supporters and try to like logically address those, but I want to try to listen to Trump supporters and understand, you know, maybe we have something to learn from them that I don't know, and I'm open to being convinced that I should vote for Trump next election season. But right now, that's not where my head's at. Fei Wu, are you a Trump supporter that wants to speak up?
I'm an anarchist who
An
doesn't like
anarchist.
any form of government.
Interesting.
But if I had to choose, I would choose the candidate who wants to have the smallest government. So it has nothing to do with immigration or homophobia, transgenderism, because I believe any form of government is represents oppression. So dictatorship is the minority oppressing the majority, and democracy is the majority oppressing the minority. I'm Chinese. Throughout Chinese history, when the government is the smallest, for example, in early Han and the early Tang periods, China.
It's nothing to do with Trump, man.
I'm just explaining my rationale, why I choose the candidates who proposes the smallest.
So I think, Sean, she's saying she would choose Trump because Trump stands for small government from her perspective. Is that right?
Which means more, yeah, which means more liberty and rights for people, and society flourishes when the government is the smallest throughout 3,700 years Chinese history. Like
I'm sorry, I have to interrupt this lady.
Sorry, let me finish first.
Hang on, Sean, let her finish.
Early Han and the early Tang periods, the early kings, during those dynasties reduced taxes and imposed minimum disturbance regulations, policies, and punishments upon.
I'll tell you a little something 2,000 years ago, lady.
Be quiet.
Sean, let her speak.
Please show some respect. Let me finish.
But do try to finish your thoughts, just because we have a lot of people with hands.
And the people are the happiest, most fulfilled, freest, and the most wealthiest during those periods. So that's my rationale. So, and as an anarchist, I don't like any form of government, but I would choose the smallest form of government if I had to choose.
I would encourage you to research a modern state that actually lives anarchy right now, which is Somalia. It has no form of government. No, at least the last I checked, there was no stable form of government whatsoever. So they are truly living anarchy. And I would argue it's not a very economically successful state. It's not a very healthy, wealthy state. It's not a very safe state. And the anarchy states of countries that I've known were not healthy, wealthy, safe places. If you read the book called Leviathan, it goes into, you know, the benefits of having a stable government that imparts justice not only for the majority but for everybody, to try to minimize significant harm in society. I definitely resonate with small government, so I like small government too. But having some level of government that keeps everybody safe seems like an important aspect of modern governments that's existed since the end of feudal times, really from the Enlightenment. You know, Leviathan was the book that brought that about. And I'd argue the world has gotten safer, healthier, wealthier ever since Leviathan was written and enacted into forms of government. I disagree. Sorry, was there someone else that wanted to speak up?
Hi, Hi, it's
Yeah,
Alice.
I
I'm
would
just
like
in the
to see that.
background. Just to let everyone know, tonight there's a lot of people. We got about 6 hands up. So about 2.5 minutes per comment, up to 3 to wrap up.
Yes,
so
and
thank you so
also
much.
please keep your comments or questions to one comment or one question per time that you raise your hand, just to keep things moving quickly because we do have a lot of hands up. So Octavio, go ahead.
I feel annoyed when I hear somebody, saying what you said about Somalia. If you want to go to a free anarchist state, or place, you can go to Somalia or Madagascar, but those places are under attack, I think, economically and otherwise by foreign countries. So to say that, if you want to go to an anarchist place, go to Somalia, to me is unfair. I want to say
But
something.
isn't that an inherent flaw in anarchy? Is there's no one to defend the state?
But my argument is that they're under attack.
Right, but they're under attack because they have no stable government to defend the state.
By foreign governments.
Right, but isn't that an inherent flaw in anarchy in the first place? Is that there's no stable government to defend the state? To defend the state's population.
In the Spanish Civil War, they had anarchism that was working until they were sabotaged. So there's some argument that could, I don't know too much about it, but that's how I feel, but so apart from that, I want to say that, I don't know if you can hear me, but
yeah, go ahead.
I support Trump in a way, but that's only under the awareness of what he did to Mexicans and Latin Americans. I think that's really messed up because I think I read somewhere that said most of those children were kept under torture conditions and they were sold into trafficking, sex trafficking.
What are you talking about again?
Trump.
What about Trump?
The border.
Oh, that you're saying that the people at the border were sold into sex crimes?
Yeah.
Do you have a source for that? I may have heard that, but I haven't found a source for it.
That they went missing. They're not accounted for, but they were still kept under really bad circumstances, and I think that's that's unforgivable. And to talk about it, I felt irritated when I heard you say that was a good way to keep Mexicans out of America.
I don't think it was a good way. I'm sorry, Octavio, if you felt like I meant that. I said I said it was an effective way. I think it was an unethical way and not one that we should support as a country. We should consider that a crime. I would consider creating a policy like that a crime because it's really a human rights violation. So I don't support it at all. I think it was horrible. I'm just saying it was an effective deterrent at immigration, but thank you for sharing your opinion, and I understand why you were upset by it. That wasn't what I meant at all.
Right. I have some other things to say, but
yeah, if you don't mind, raise your hand again, just because we have a lot of hands up. And thank you for your comments. And sorry if I miscommunicated my opinion there. I'm trying to be as objective as I can and tread that middle ground of being objective but still being able to have an opinion. So Sean, go ahead.
Why did Trump get elected? I think several reasons. Number one, electoral college. 2016, Trump lost nearly 2 million popular vote, so he still won, right? Number two is Trump running for president since 1996, I believe. Okay, nobody take serious about him. Okay, even 2016, majority people think he's not going to win. So a lot of voters went to the poll to vote because it's so low. The Trump going to lose. Okay, and also I have to say something fair about Trump. He did say something, point out some problem our country is facing. Okay, American got a problem. For example, crime. Crime is a big problem, and otherwise the border security. It's a world, we live in this world that has so many misery. We know a lot of people poor, they want a better life. I'm an immigrant. I say this, some people maybe disagree with me, okay, but we cannot have an open border. We have to have a border, okay, because we just can't take everyone, right? If look at Europe the same, if you don't have a border, all the poor people want to live a better life. So everybody watching ads, rushing, how many we can take?
Yeah, this is a common misunderstanding. I hear a lot of times people say we can't have open borders, but I've never seen any politician argue that there should be open borders. If anyone can find a site of a politician arguing for open borders that's an elected member of our Congress, I would really love to see it. I've never seen any elected member of Congress arguing for open borders. They all argue for immigration control. It's just about whether or not, like, we literally shut down all immigrants, even those that are working for Google and Apple and Microsoft, which under Trump, like even Google and Apple and Facebook and Microsoft stopped trying to hire immigrants, which are H-1B visas, because Trump basically said no to everybody.
I agree with you. I know what you mean. Actually, I want to point out, depending on how you say it, I don't think a Democrat want to have an open border policy. The only thing their policy is not as strong as Trump, that's for sure. For example, how about say this way, war, okay? The best way actually have a war is much easier. So we don't have this disaster. Say without a war, everybody try to rush in, create a crisis there, make us look bad, right? You beat people back, so you don't want them to come in. It's bad for us, okay? And also other social issues Trump point out. And also, I know a lot of people think Trump is a businessman. Maybe we found someone different, someone have a business background and run our country as a business. Turn out it's a disaster, okay? I would say George W. Bush bankrupt our country, okay? 2 crises, cut tax, 2 wars, and skyrocketing our national debt. And Trump bankrupt our moral, okay? American become butt of joke in international stage. People just laugh, that joke. He lost, he keeps saying he's winning, okay? That's wrong, that's absolutely bullshit, okay? Trump is a liar, a common and sore loser. This is what I want to say, okay?
Thanks, Sean. Rose, go ahead.
Thank you. I want to say, I want to just give some feedback about the lecture you gave, because if you don't mind, it's not with malicious intent at all. I just wanted to give you some feedback. I felt that it lacks nuance, and the reason why I say that is because you kind of lumped, Trump supporters as a monolithic group that has like a certain set of beliefs. And I'm not a Trump supporter, but I just felt like it doesn't really work like that. I think that some of the reasons why people voted is because they're more loyal to their ideologies. And it's not necessarily that they're loyal to this human being, this man called Trump, but more so they're loyal to their ideologies and who was going to bring forth these ideologies. Now, some of the ideologies can consist of coming from a more religious perspective, like, the anti-gay rhetoric or anti-trans rhetoric, etc. But a lot of it is also because of economic reasons. Like they want a more free economy. They want more like economic power, economic say. They want less taxes. you know, obviously with abortion is also a huge issue as well. But I think it's more so like it's not necessarily they are voting for Trump as much as they're voting for someone who they believe is going to hold up a certain ideology that they believe in. And the other thing is, like, I think I have to disagree with you about your earlier points regarding the Leviathan, which is written by Thomas Hobbes, and which argues like for government. I think that you misunderstand what anarchy is. I think you know, during the Spanish Civil War, there were communities that were outsider communities that are considered anarchic, and they lived in peace and cooperation and helped each other and stuff like that. And I would also argue that, so no, anarchy doesn't mean chaos. Anarchy, it means like, you know, less government intervention, and you know, people can govern themselves. And it's the Leviathan argues that people are by nature violent and corrupt and will hurt each other, but that's not true. That's his perspective on what he thinks human nature is, but it's not. I have a different perspective on it. A lot of sociologists and psychologists and others have different perspective on that. I would argue that a lot of the human history has actually been based on cooperation and compromise, as it was stated in the book Sapiens, for example, where he outlines in great detail how human societies were mostly based on cooperation. So I would have to disagree on the fact that, you know, the way that Thomas Hobbes paints human nature as being, you know, largely violent and etc. I feel like that's not actually factual. And I also think that the state itself can oppress people. We've seen many instances where the state has done a great deal of oppression towards others. So state-sponsored violence is also a problem that needs to be addressed.
Rose, thank you so much for your comment. Thank you.
Yeah, so Rose, you said a lot there, and that's why I want to try to keep things to one comment, because otherwise we get into a very long dialogue. But yeah, I was pretty clear that I don't think all Trump supporters have all the beliefs that I said, and you brought up a couple of other ones that were good that I didn't mention in the presentation. I thank you for that. Definitely loyalty to ideology is one that a good friend of mine, you know, voted for Trump because he was loyal to the ideology of conservatism. And like you said, you know, less taxes, felt like that was economically beneficial. So that's why he voted for Trump, even though he said he didn't like him very much. But yeah, I guess the point about Leviathan is really to say that having some central authority creates more fairness than having none. It doesn't necessarily assume that everybody is horrible or evil. I think most people, I have a lot of faith in humanity, and I think most people are good people, but it only takes one bad guy with a semi-automatic rifle to kill quite a few people and steal all their money and all their wealth. And if you get 100 of those guys agreeing with each other, you know, they become bullies that basically take over society and become a militia that takes over, you know, from an anarchy and forms a stable government, and not one that is really in it for the people. I do think that Spain has, and I'm very familiar with Spain's examples of anarcho-syndicatism. I forget exactly how to pronounce it in English, but I lived in Spain for a year, so I know what you're talking about. And yeah, I'm not saying that anarchy has never had any successful ventures, but most situations of anarchy were generally net negative, is all I was saying, as a general rule. But I agree with you. I have a lot of faith in humanity. I think most human beings are good people. And I think all human beings think they're good people, even if some of them are not. They see themselves as good people, even if we see them sometimes as bad people. That's another story for another day, and it'll probably be a whole nother evening where we can talk about misunderstandings. That said, I want to let Richard go, and let's try to keep it to one commenter, et cetera, so that we can focus on a little bit more back and forth and give more people a chance to talk. So Richard Gorman.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was struck by this thing about small government. With no government, there would be no roads. You couldn't buy a pound of something knowing it was a pound. You couldn't buy food knowing it was safe. You couldn't be safe in your house from people who would break in and take everything. That's the way we lived in 5000 BC. But as soon as people began to do government, things got better. And I can point to the last 40 years in China. China was one of the poorest nations in the world until the government stopped being idealistic and started being practical and used big government. The Chinese government funded tremendous amount of development, and now they're quite prosperous.
Yeah, I think those are great points. And Richard, I mentioned that I like small government, but I give you an example of what I like in small government is if you take the State Department of Insurance, it's a very small organization, but if an insurance company doesn't do its job, they lay down the hammer, man. Like they will get that insurance company being compliant and making sure they're paying on the claims. And so it's an example of a small government, but one with a big stick. And I like that sort of small government with a big stick that makes sure that companies act ethically to prevent all the things you're talking about, Richard, which is, people selling food that's poisonous and, all the, not having roads. Those are all really important things and functions of government that I'm very appreciative for. And I don't mind paying lots of taxes for. And I do pay lots of taxes, and I'm okay with that because I get all those great services that you talked about. So I think great points, Richard. Thank you for making them. I appreciate it. And Gary, go ahead. We finally got to you, Gary. Welcome back. Sorry it took a while. I think you didn't know how to raise your hand in Zoom. Sorry for that. You're on mute, by the way.
Okay, so I'm a little confused by the segment. It seems like we all had disparate points to make. I originally thought it was for pro-Trumpism. I only had one positive thing to say, so I thought I should volunteer.
Please.
The only positive thing I have to say for a vehement anti-Trumper is that you'll recall he was threatening to destroy the Affordable Care Act. And at the time, I had taught tennis for decades and was in relatively good shape after 40 years of vegetarianism. But the threat of not having a safety net, AKA healthcare, led me to go to a doctor. I, at the time, was having a little bit with a guy 20 years my junior, very good tennis player, a little bit shortness of breath, a little bit of pain in my heart. Thought nothing of it. He thought maybe I pulled a muscle lifting weights or working out. Maybe pulled a muscle or a little clot rather. And so it led me to go to the doctor before we had nothing available to us for who knows how many years. 23 million Americans might have been impacted if he came through with the destruction of the ACA. So in going there, I was kind of going as a hypochondriac. And the doctor fortunately asked me the best question anybody will ever ask me. She asked me, is there anything else you want to tell me? And I said, well, I shrugged my shoulders. I said, it's probably much ado about nothing, but what I just mentioned. And she said, you're going to a cardiologist in 3 weeks. And I said, you've got to be out of your mind. You must have forgotten. I told you 20 minutes ago, I've been a 40-year vegetarian. You should tell me to get out. I'm wasting your time. But she didn't. She not only listened to me, she acted on it. And that saved my life, and which led to a quintuple bypass. So I'm thankful for him only in that respect. He put the fear of God, and I'm agnostic anyway, but into me to be proactive. The other thing, some people are weighing in on the election, and I still have a bit of time, and I'll be succinct as I usually am, because I always have zero tolerance for ADD, and people inevitably cut me off very early into this. Trump won, people, whether you realize it or not. This guy was, this freak show, quote unquote, was carried 24/7, 365 on TV. Every network carried him because their Nielsen ratings were great, and they ran with him. And to the tune of a $4 billion average free advertising windfall he got. Anybody could have been elected. Satan, Hitler, of course, I'm being hyperbolic. That's what led to the election. His ratings were great, and they ran with him, and that's what you got. That's it.
Yeah.
End of my soliloquy.
Thank you, Gary. That's a great point. I didn't mention that Trump is a a longtime TV guy, and he knows, like, he has a saying, any press is good press, and that really did work to his favor in terms of drumming up a lot of support. He was in front of people's eyeballs more often than anyone else. By the way, Gary, just because you're agnostic doesn't mean you can't have a fear of God. That's Pascal's wager, can put a fear of God into even agnostic. So just for fun, I thought I'd mention that.
I'm not a gambler though.
Well, I'm just saying, we're all making that gamble one way or another, whether
That's
we
true.
like it or not. We're making
Very
Pascal's
true.
wagers gamble.
Yep,
I have a logical argument defending God, and so, but the different concept of God than the Abrahamic God. So that's another topic for another night.
Yeah.
Hopefully you'll come back for that one if you like talking about God as an agnostic.
God
Dan,
bless you.
thank you. Dan, go ahead.
Thanks. Just wanted to kind of just echo Gary's sentiments and about the reasons. And I think to a larger point that I kind of brought up a little bit earlier in chat too, but that this whole populist wave that we saw with Bernie Sanders and also with Donald Trump, where it was very much this anti-establishment sentiment amongst voters, very people who have been disaffected. And I think this even goes back all the way, to 9/11 and the Iraq war with Bush. Is, we saw, I think a lot of progressives especially saw a lot of disappointment in Obama, especially after the first term. And then when it finally came up, when Obama had 2 terms, here we are, 2016. They're finally pushing forward, someone who's going to, end, what Obama allegedly couldn't, and I can speak as somewhat of a disaffected, a one-term Obama, never voted for a major party candidate since voter, as being someone who kind of fell into that camp and still have been very much politically agnostic and on the sidelines, not a Trump supporter necessarily, but I can empathize with the sentiment. Now, I can, my observations of, and I know several people who, probably some of them who, the most far left progressive, the types who organize local Occupy Wall Street types, who did a complete 180 on politics after they saw Bernie get burned by the DNC. And some of them either, sat out the election, or even just did an about face and just pulled the lever for Trump to spite Hillary.
Yeah.
As disastrous as that might be, I think that's really what tipped the scales in his favor. On top of that, you also combine why the blue collar, why that they left or abandoned the Democratic Party and found so much resonance. The rural blue collar voter, all just tiptoed into Trump. And I think that a lot of that goes into the overall sentiment, the populist sentiment, where he just could speak off the cuff. He was just calling BS where he saw it, and people loved it. He's an entertainer, So, and I'll just wrap up my thoughts with one final thing is that, I think that with Donald Trump, and something that was really unprecedented is the fact, the way that he used social media, especially not only leading up to his, his 2016 campaign, but during his presidency as well, where there was no longer a media filter that could distill. I mean, he could just talk off the cuff 24/7 directly to his supporters and his base. And I think that resonated strongly and brings to a wider discussion about not, especially with the Twitter files, congressional hearings that we have going on today, about why that's so crucial to the government about wanting to control information because of how much is deemed a threat. I don't want to get into a wider discussion about that specifically, but I think it's important in context to consider how that's going to change the makeup of elections going forward, and the public square and the discussion of how we have these out in the open, where media is no longer going to have the control that they normally did, as well as the parties, to really control these things. And whether it's going to be distilled into two major parties, going forward, I don't think that's a problem that we can, necessarily ranked choice voting going to necessarily solve, as long as I think is how the narrative, or at least how the conversation has in the national media. That's what's going to determine, whether we have someone, or we have third-party ideas, or whether, we're just, we're going to deal with a fight within the Republican Party. It's going to get distilled between Trump supporters and an establishment candidate. I feel like that's more dangerous than splitting things out several ways. So I'll yield my time, and that's all I got to say.
Great, thank you. Yeah, great point on the Bernie or bust, folks, because I didn't address that. I think there were a lot of people, and someone else mentioned because he's not Hillary in the comments, but hasn't spoken up yet. I hope that he will speak up, because I think he was a Trump supporter. The person, he or she, was a Trump supporter that said that. A lot of people didn't like Hillary, or felt like Bernie was so wronged by the DNC in the primaries. A lot of people felt, and I did at one point too, that that the electors turned against Bernie and actually wrested democracy out of the hands of Bernie's win and gave it to Hillary. But it turns out that's not true. When I fact checked it, Hillary had plenty of delegates to win the nomination, even if there were some electors that voted for Hillary instead of Bernie that were supposed to vote for Bernie. But even if they had not done that, Bernie still would have lost. And so it actually turns out that Bernie did lose fair and square, quote unquote, although I wouldn't argue that it was fair and square, because he didn't take any PAC money, whereas Hillary did take PAC money. So I think Bernie was the more pure candidate in that regard. But I do think there was a lot of rhetoric against Hillary by Bernie supporters. And I do think some people voted against Hillary for Trump because they felt like Bernie was cheated out of the nomination. And I do want to say, like, when I fact checked that, it didn't hold water. I also want to recommend a blog post on what you talked about around social media, and how social media is wresting control of the media in the dialogue. Blue Church, Red Religion is a good blog post. If you Google Blue Church, Red Religion, it talks about the societal impact of the dialogue, the public dialogue, going from only authoritative sources to social media. And it's a very interesting, thoughtful blog post on that subject that I would recommend people read. It's really a big paradigm change to have everybody have a voice on social media, and anyone that gets followed has a bigger voice. That's a big paradigm change from the way that news has been disseminated since the beginning of human history. It was only authorities that could disseminate to large groups of people up until social media. And now anyone that can pull in an audience can disseminate information. So it's a very big paradigm shift. And I don't think society has really adjusted to it, because so much misinformation and disinformation comes out on social media. And we should have a whole nother topic for an evening. Ellis, if you can take that down as a note, for misinformation and disinformation and its propagation. The fact is, fake news travels faster than real news these days. Scientifically proven that fake news travels faster than real news. So really good points that you made there. So thanks for bringing them up. And Octavio, I'm going to let you go.
You know what? I forgot what I was going to say.
Okay, well, think about it and raise your hand again, and we'll let Abe go. Sorry, Octavio, I always like to hear what you have to say. We'll get it. Well, yeah, hopefully something will jog your memory in the conversation coming up. So Abe, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, Trump wasn't an accident. When you look at the history, as of 1980, after Reagan, when they came up with this reduced taxes, and reduce government spending. It created a huge gap between the rich and poor. And even the demographic shifted. I mean, it was in the 80s, it was a predominantly white country. But as of the 1980s, now the population of the Caucasians or whites is going to be less than 60%. And they could live, if you had a job, I mean, you could afford a car, you could afford everything. But now all of a sudden they find that, with this big disparity, they can't afford many things. And all of a sudden you come with all these immigrants who come in, and the jobs of today, they require a lot of skill sets, which we don't produce those kind of skill sets in this country. You have to import it, especially things in science and technology and things like that. And actually, I mean, everybody keeps talking about this immigrants who come across the border. I mean, people are really, I mean, if you really look at it, people are not resenting them. They are more, they resent the educated immigrants who come into the country. And I think this was a fertile time to come, for Trump to come into the whole picture. And he pandered to those needs, cutting off immigration, from all these different countries, calling the Chung flu or whatever it is against the Muslims, and created this problem. And that's where we are today. And Trump was a savior, and that's all I got to say.
Thank you, Abe. And I do think that he did try to position himself as a savior. That was the screenshot that I showed where he said, what was it? For those of you that have been wronged and betrayed, I am your retribution, right? Like, I am the savior. I'm the one that's going to save you from all the wrongs that have been done to you. And so I do think that's how he positioned himself. There was some stuff, and I'm not able to follow all the text chat, but I'm able to see a little bit here and there. And another one that someone mentioned, which I didn't bring up, but was important, is about Putin's involvement and Russia's involvement, the Russia intelligence community's involvement in hacking Hillary Clinton a couple weeks before the election. And the other thing was they paid for hundreds of millions of ads that were psychographically targeted to send misinformation to like people who are on the fence in terms of voting. And so the vote was very close. It was within a couple 100,000 votes in swing states between Trump and Hillary Clinton. So to think that those two things didn't have any impact is a little bit hard of an argument to make, because hundreds of millions of psychographically targeted ads plus Hillary's emails getting hacked a couple of weeks before before, and having some some dirt. And we all know that behind the scenes, politicians aren't always as polite as they are publicly, and these were private emails that got put into the public purview. So to think that that didn't have any impact on the election, that's a hard argument to make, in my opinion. So yeah, I guess great points being made by people, and that's how I want to let Rose go. Hi, Rose.
Hi, yeah, just to add to your point. So the original question for today was, why did Trump get elected? I'd like to give a couple of points just to add to what you're saying.
Yeah, please.
So first of all, I think Hillary Clinton, people saw her as a warmonger. So she voted for to go to Iraq. So he was able to use that against her, and rightfully so, because that war was a complete and utter disaster that, cycled into many, many other wars in the region. That's number one. Number two, I think she called a huge swath of the American population deplorables.
Yeah.
So I think that is a very horrible thing to say about your fellow Americans. I think like you want to be representing the whole country, and yet you just called half the country or whatever deplorables. So that's kind of that weakened her as well. I think also a lot of the policies. So I'm not even American. I'm Canadian, and I'm not even a Trump supporter or anything like that. But I'm like trying to like, I spend a lot of time trying to see it from the other side. Like, why would people vote for somebody like that? Like a lot of the policies and the pandering of the Democratic Party are about appeasing a victimhood mindset, and trying to cater to a victimhood mindset. A lot of people kind of like want to complain and don't want to take ownership and responsibility, just want to blame like a system. And now it might be systemic for sure. There are some systemic inequalities, but some of it is also about taking accountability and taking agency, right? And so like a lot of people from the Democratic side, they vote Democratic because they think the government is going to come and save them. And I feel like that's not a good approach. I think people should take agency of their own life instead of having, because once you become dependent on the government, I feel like that also puts you in a very weak and vulnerable position. You can't achieve your full potential when you're depending on the government like that. So I think there's a lot of reasons why Trump got elected. Like I said, and Obama, and then my final point is about Obama. So Obama was a huge disappointment for so many people who kind of pinned their hopes upon him and his amazing speeches. He's a great orator and had, promised many different things, but at the end of the day did not deliver, failed to deliver. He actually kicked out more immigrants, undocumented immigrants than any president before him. I think it was like 2.5 million or something like that. He also started, many covert wars. So he didn't send the troops directly, but he used drones and other tactics to kill people and to stir up trouble in the Middle East and North Africa and stuff like that. So he was a huge disappointment. Obamacare was also, did not live up to its promise and stuff like that. So I think those are part of the reasons why Trump got elected.
Yeah, a lot to unpack there. So agree with you. I'm pretty sure Hillary regretted saying deplorables. Like I would be shocked if she's not like, didn't beat herself up a lot over that. I do think that Trump tried to come in as the savior for the victimhood mindset. I don't know. Maybe it's just the Democrats that I know. I don't know a lot of Democrats that think the government's going to come in and save them. And in fact, there was a Democrat that actually ended indefinite what's it called? Government assistance welfare. It was Bill Clinton that ended indefinite welfare. So it was Democrats that ended the cycle of being able to be on welfare indefinitely. And I agree that Obama was a disappointment to many people. He ran on a whole platform of change, and then he was really anything but change. He was just another politician. I agree with your criticism that he started drone wars, and I think that was a dangerous precedent. The other negative thing about Obama is that he was really bad to whistleblowers, so you didn't get a lot of people saying bad things about his administration because he really brutally repressed any whistleblowers and just really negative stuff there.
And sorry, just to one more point, he bailed out the big banks in the crash of 2008, which rubbed a lot of people the wrong way as well, because there was no accountability for anybody who messed the economy whatsoever. Like
that was Bush. Bush bailed out the banks.
No, Obama as well. Like he came in after Bush, and he was credited with helping the economy, but in fact he bailed out a lot of the corporations that caused the
If you can put a source there, Rose, of banks that were bailed out under Obama, that would be great, because Bush was the one that started bailing out banks.
Yes, I agree. I think
And
Gary is right.
I don't think many banks got bailed out by Obama. If there were, it was a small minority compared to what Bush did. Bush did the major bailing out of banks. We should have
Obama
another
helped,
talk
also-
about the
also-
2008
also-
crisis and maybe even as it relates to the SVB crisis, which yeah. So, Alia, papi está hablando. So Barbara, go ahead.
Well, getting on to the Russiagate thing, I heard this a whole episode on WikiLeaks, and Julius Assange, according to this, he played to Julius Assange. He manipulates people. He uses them for whatever he wants. So he used Julius Assange. He kept saying, "I like WikiLeaks. I like WikiLeaks," and Julius Assange was hoping he would save him. So I think he was behind the Russiagate thing.
Yeah, I mean,
To a large
Julian
extent, he
Assange-
supplied the information to them.
It's an interesting hypothesis I haven't heard. Julian Assange, you know, like is a controversial guy, but WikiLeaks just lets some people report things anonymously. I think that the Russians, you know, there was very clear evidence that the Russians were behind hacking Hillary. Who else would have done it or would have had the capability to do it? I saw some things in the comments claiming that the Russia stuff was dropped, but I haven't. I'd love a source for that. Yeah, I guess you know, I'm not sure. I haven't heard any reason to think that Russia was not behind the hacking of Hillary Clinton. Everything I've heard pointed in that direction, including from people I know in the intelligence community. So yeah, I guess I would be interested to hear evidence to the contrary to challenge my own confirmation bias. But that said, I want to let Anna go next. Hi, Anna. Good to see you again.
Hi, good to see you. To me, the reason was pretty simple. Hillary was a woman. She was a very intelligent woman. And I think that, frankly, there were a lot of men who said, I'm never going to vote for an intelligent woman. I think she made some mistakes. I also think Trump had the advantage of money. And somehow he got all the attention on TV. He knew how to get it. But I think it was ultimately, I don't think Hillary could have done anything. I mean, she did get the popular vote, but so what? The districts have been so gerrymandered that even if she got the popular vote, she was not going to win the election. That's all.
Thanks. You know, it's interesting. I think I didn't address earlier. Someone said, you know, people were voting against Hillary. I'm curious if any Trump supporters could share what they disliked, or not even Trump supporters, anyone who voted against Hillary. Like if there's anyone here that voted against Hillary or like can empathize with people who voted against Hillary. I've heard of a lot of reasons that people voted against Hillary, and I fact checked every single one of them. And only one of them turned out to actually be true. And that one was that she pulled strings to try to protect her husband when he got caught getting a blowjob from a, you know, a seductress that, you know, like that I kind of like can forgive that one because, you know, that's like, I mean, like, I don't know that many human beings would not pull strings to try to cover up, you know, a private scandal between a husband and a wife, which quite frankly, I don't think is anyone's business what politicians do with their personal lives. And same thing with Trump. Like, I don't really care what he does in his personal life. You know, he was like bragging about cheating on his wife, you know, in video. And I, you know, that's not to me important. What matters is what you do in the public sphere and what you do as a public figure. And that's really more the way that we should judge people, to me, although what you do in your personal life does have a reflection on the public as well. So I'm not saying it's totally irrelevant, but I care more about people's public actions than I do about their private actions. That said, I do think Hillary, being an intelligent woman, turned off, and someone in the comments, I think it was Will, mentioned that a lot of I think it was Australia or New Zealand's prime minister, that he was saying that people were being catty because, and women didn't want to vote for her. And I think that it's maybe not just men that didn't want to vote for Hillary because she was a woman, but it was probably also women not wanting to vote for her because she was a woman. And, you know, I hope that that will change with time, and people will not judge people based on their sex, because that's not the right, in my opinion. You know, she didn't choose to be born a woman, as far as we know, although we had another conversation on past life experiences where someone did claim that people do get to choose what sex they were born sometimes. That's a different story and very metaphysical, but as far as most of us know, we don't get to choose our sex. And so I don't think it's a fair reason to judge people on that. And even if we do choose it, I still don't think it's a fair reason to judge people on it. So that said, I want to let Octavio go because he's had his hand up for a while.
I heard a couple of things that I wanted to reply to. One of them was the case for socialism, and I've heard a lot of. I've heard the message. I've heard something being said where it's, the government's not going to take care of you and get you your hopes and dreams, and you have to pull yourself up by the bootstraps, and this kind of rhetoric. And I think that it's true. The government shouldn't go out and achieve your hopes and dreams for you. I think that's ridiculous. But I believe that the government should take care of somebody, especially if they can. Things like paying rent, the bills, and food. I think all these things should be free. They should be given to the people in order for them to be able to achieve their hopes and dreams. And I always keep hearing this message about, the government's not going to take care of you and get you what you want. I get that, but I don't understand. The only way you can achieve your hopes and dreams is if you have the space for it. If you don't have to worry about your bills, and you can work on yourself. You can go to seek the help that you need, but not if you're having to worry about a physical existence, like paying the rent and this sort of thing. So I believe that there should be some level of socialism enough to set a standard to where somebody can have a car and a place to live and this sort of thing in order for them to achieve their hopes and dreams. The other thing I heard was something about the border and advocating for the border policies, or what happened in the Trump because to me it's obvious, but I came up with something, and this is it. I think that, and I'm just to be clear, this is more of a making fun, a parody. But I think all white people should move back to the 13 colonies and make that great again, and kick out those that fall under a certain percentage. Only a certain percentage of genealogy can go back to the 13 colonies, and everybody else will be kicked out. I think that that could be a good idea. And I say that just to be ridiculous.
Now that's ridiculous. So, Octavio, that's ridiculous. We should give America back to the natives. We should, all of us European immigrants should move the hell out of America and give it back to the natives, because immigrants are bad. And Trump's an immigrant too. He should get out. He should go back to his country.
And because so I just don't understand how anybody can forgive what happened. I understand that not everybody can come over because we have too many resources, but I also don't see any help to Mexico. Why doesn't America give more? seeing as how the situation, what the situation is like over there. Life is cheap, and I don't know what how to rationalize it other than attributing these types of people as being irrational and cruel. I wish I could have an answer.
Eleonore asked like how you vote against someone. You basically, if you're voting against a Democrat, you vote for the Republican in this case. That's a vote against someone, is voting for the other. And that's the problem with the two-party system, is you can vote against people that way. Whereas a force rank voting is a much better way of voting. That said, I'm going to do a little bit of finagling with the hands up, because we have 3 people with their hands up that haven't spoken yet. So for the 2 of you that have spoken, I'm gonna, if you don't mind, I'm gonna jump some other people ahead of you. So I'm gonna go to Nabojsa next.
Yes, thank you. I'm from Serbia, from Eastern Europe. One of the countries where Trump's election was very much like celebrated, just for let's say local reasons, like to get some more some different treatment in from foreign policy agencies of US. Anyway, I posted a reworded article by Aaron Mate about the Russia Gate. I think he is calling it conspiracy theory. I'm against derogatory terms like conspiracy theories, but what you said, Garrett, about Russia meddling, if it is true, I just have to say you that then all elections in the entire world are not valid, because it is exactly US government that meddles in all elections around the world.
So it does. It does. Don't be fooled. The US government has meddled in many elections.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm not going to say all, okay? That's very extreme. Like, there are many elections that the US doesn't care about, but the US has meddled in so many elections, it's unfathomable. We've not only meddled in elections, we've unseated democratically elected governments many times. You know, Iran, the reason Iran is in the situation it's in is because we, unseated the democratically elected government and put the Shah in place. Right. So we've done a lot of like really horrible things to democracies around the world. So that's a definite yes. We do that. I don't like that. And I try to vote for people who won't do that. And I try to vote against people who will do that. But our country has done it, like it or not, we have done it.
Okay, just if I was in US, I would vote for Clinton, no matter what I do. But for example, there was no any Russian agency to discover her reaction related to lynching of Muammar Gaddafi. He was lynched, and she cheered that publicly, as no statesman would do for anyone, even for the worst enemy. You don't cheer like that, like a kid in a school playground, like. Anyway, just I will post in a chat why Trump was elected. I think that there is a fantastic analysis by Karl Marx of the first so-called populist in history of democracy. That was the niece of Napoleon. Louis Bonaparte was his name, and he was elected in specific situation in France in half of 19th century. And Marx exactly described how different fractions of different classes somehow could inscribe hope, or at least some reasoning, in picking and selecting him, in spite of the fact that he had no any reputation. In fact, his formula about Louis Bonaparte is something that I suppose could be related to Trump. He described him as his depth. He was very indebted person, very adventurous, financial, etc. His depth was spurring him ahead, and there was no reputation to hold him back. This is how he described Louis Bonaparte, and this is what I can recognize in Trump. So thank you for discussion. I will post in a chat a description of Marx, and just realize how many fractions of which classes in American society had more interest in supporting something different that, for example, brought to Rust Belt, or that they thought brought to Rust Belt or opioid epidemic, etc., etc. So it's political logic, nothing else. And then inscribing into some very special influence by foreigners, I'm sorry, but it is classical incapacity of political mind to understand what is house within the political body and then projects it outside. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And then I want to go to certainly C and then MH after that.
Hi, I'm Creation.
Sorry.
That's okay. So I just wanted to make a comment on Hillary as president getting voted against for being a woman. I think ideally, right, is all countries, including ours, would respect men and women equally. However, right, there are plenty of other countries that are quite powerful that don't respect women naturally. And so to assume that we're going to have as efficient of communication and effective communication, you know, with that in mind, I think it would be better for our interests to have a male who also upholds the equality of women, you know, in the forefront of their policies. Instead, just for the reality that we're in currently.
It's an interesting perspective. I guess I would take the opposite perspective, which is like, wouldn't it be nice to have a female president and have her meet with one of these countries that doesn't respect women and know that this woman has far more power than they do, like unfathomably more power than they do, and they're forced to respect a woman because they know that she has way more power than they do, and she's wielding it with authority but compassion and caring and thoughtfulness. And to show that as an example of a woman wielding power more effectively than a man, I think would be a very powerful statement. So I hear what you're saying, and I understand where you're coming from, but I'd argue you can also make an argument for the opposite. If you have a woman who will represent power in a really like classy way, which I think Hillary Clinton was a pretty classy person. Like I don't think there's been anyone that was more qualified to be president than her when she ran, that hadn't already been president already. So I think she could have been that. Which
we're also assigning a lot of values. Even in saying that, you're assuming compassion, you're assuming this kind of grace and efforts to bring together rather than to assert their authority, right? Is we're assigning certain traits, and other countries are not actually forced to respect anyone, right? We could end up in a situation where we've had a certain diplomatic relationship that now are being undermined, and coercive techniques are being used to overcome a woman.
So theoretically true, but we have a lot of leverage. So it would be hard to get around the US hegemony, whether we like it or not.
But maybe not the best
like that. I kind of don't like that, quite frankly. I wish we had a little less authority and we worked more through influence than we do. But given our current situation, we actually have quite a bit of authority, even though I don't like that.
I would say that that's not the best use of our money.
I agree with you. I agree with you completely. And I hope that we start to reduce our authority and start to create more alliances. And actually, we had the first event of this year, I tried to make an argument that we could create peace on earth, literally, just by creating more alliances and spending less on our military. But that's, if anyone wants the video to that one, let me know. We haven't uploaded it on YouTube, but that said, I want to let MH go because they haven't spoken yet, and we're at about 10 till. So we're going to kind of let the folks. Ellis, did you have something you wanted to say quickly?
Oh yes, just to everyone, I posted our membership, free membership information. Garrett has 5 intentions for this organization, so everyone's welcome to look. I posted a short survey as well as our links. We continue discussion in our online community, so everyone's welcome to join our Discord. And just very quickly, I'll just let you all know our upcoming topics.
Yes, thanks.
Okay, because we'd love to see everyone again. So one moment. Let's see here. So we have next week is an introduction to Baha'i. That's Baha'i religion. And we have on the 21st, college entrance affirmative action. And on the 4th, we'll be talking about solutions to gun violence. So we hope to see you all there.
Yeah, we would love to have people come for those. They should be interesting conversations. Baha'is a really cool religion. And I'm gonna, we have a bunch of other people that raised their hands that haven't spoken yet. So I want to go through, try to keep them brief if you don't mind, because we do have a lot of hands up and not a lot of time, and we do have to end right around 9. And I want to give like a couple minute intro to the online community so that we can continue the conversation there. I'm going to let MH go, and then because Richard and Abe have been waiting patiently, I'm going to let them go next, and then we'll go through the remainder of the folks. I do want to let those with hands up. Please don't raise any more hands, because I do want to get through the folks that we have, but limited time. So MH.
Well, this doesn't just pertain to Trump, but why do people vote for anyone? I think too many of us are just listening to sound bites and not really doing our research. And so sometimes we vote based on false impressions. I know that we have got George Soros, we've got Murdoch, both of them, one's from Hungary, one's from Australia. And yet there are 2 worldviews that each of them represents. And we seem to be whipped up in a frenzy, too many Americans, based on these worldviews that we're being fed. And we're not really, I think, too many of us doing the research. I'll say I'm from Detroit, and my mother is one of the few Black Republicans in my family. She might not call herself a Republican, but she is a Trump supporter. Now, she's from a time when the industry, the Motor City was booming, the automobile industry, and you didn't need a college education to get a pretty good middle-class job. So a lot of her nieces and nephews didn't aspire to go to college. I wasn't one of them, but they thought those jobs would be there for them. And they weren't. They were kind of blindsided by globalism. So she voted for Trump because she thought he'd bring jobs back to Detroit. I don't know why she thought that. But
because he said he would. He did say he would.
Well, that's one reason she voted for him. The other is because she's very religious and didn't support some of the things that the liberals support.
Right.
That's really all I have to say. I'm going to go off, let someone else speak now.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I think your comment about people listening too much to sound bites, oh my God, like, I don't think a better comment has been said all night. Like, I really, if anything, if anyone learns anything tonight, it's please do research, look into things, research, learn, try to combat your confirmation bias and look for reasons that you're wrong, and look for reasons to believe X and Y and Z that are objective reasons from unbiased sources, because that's really what free thinking is about, is looking for unbiased sources and finding facts that help you piece together the truth to learn knowledge and wisdom. So I think too many people read memes and think that they're real and that they're representing reality, and they're just not. And so, Richard, why don't you go next, and then we'll go through the line as it's lined up.
I think Abe Bess has been waiting a lot longer than I have. Go to him.
Who? Okay, your hand was up before him, but I'll go to Abe. I'll see to you, and then I'll come back to you, Richard. Go ahead, Abe.
Yeah, this is with regard to. I totally think that America needs a woman as the president. I mean, it's high time. I mean, we are the most advanced country, and every country, a woman has headed the country. I mean, I can't say every country, most countries. in which when a woman heads a country, it works out much better. There's so much of prestige, and she seems to be doing a much better job. I was all for Hillary. I mean, I'm an independent. And, when they had Hillary with Bernie Sanders and Trump, I mean, I don't know, Trump, I just didn't care much for him. But when she got onto the stage, I just really thought, I mean, she was really corrupt. I mean, when they had that debate in which Bernie said, I'll tell you where I get my contributions are. Will you? And she started picking up and saying she didn't want to and tried to sideline the whole thing. I didn't think she was too forthcoming, and she lost my vote. So that's all I have to say.
Great, thank you, Abe. Richard, go ahead, and then we'll go to Marilyn.
I think the whole issue of Trump being elected, he never got the popular vote. Neither did the second Bush. And both of those really ruined the country. That's all I can say.
Great, thank you, Richard. Marilyn, you're on mute.
Hi, I knew just a couple of people who really liked Trump, but I knew many people who really just didn't like Hillary, and not because she was a woman, they just didn't like her, and they either didn't vote or they voted for like a third party member, like the Green Party or something like that. And when Trump seemed like he was getting worse and worse, I pleaded with a couple of my friends, that it just wasn't pragmatic, even in the ideal world, that there'd be many people to vote for that might have a chance. But I think that, that being against Hillary helped Trump get elected.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you, although well, there's lots of things that I liked about Bernie. He was more extreme liberal. And so it's likely that I don't know, it's likely that Hillary would have been more appealing to more moderates than Bernie would have been. But yeah, a lot of people, what Hillary had going against her is that she'd been in the Democratic scene since she was Bill Clinton's wife. And so Republicans had been attacking her for decades and just had a lot of repeated messages of negativity. Again, when I fact checked those, they didn't tend to hold water. There was a lot of misinformation, but that said, I want to let Bart go next. So go ahead, Bart. Welcome.
Thanks, Garrett. So first of all, I'm not a Trump supporter, but I did not like the framing of Trump and the supporters. Reminded me of, I've heard it for so long, and it's that gaslighting of the right by the left, because the left has the power in media right now. Maybe power swings, and maybe it's going to swing back to the right in time. And I guess what I'm trying to warn progressives, and I've been a bleeding heart liberal most of my life, but the lack of truth that progressives seem to want to grapple with is why Trump got elected. And if progressives don't learn this lesson, he will get elected again, or there will be another one like him, perhaps smarter and with more devious plans.
Yeah.
That will get elected. But you have to accept the fact that between 2016 and 2020, Trump picked up minority votes. You can't dismiss this if you really want to learn something. Only white straight males swung the vote for Biden, but blacks, Latinos, gays, Trump picked up more votes there. And that's
What do you
all I
think
want to
caused
say.
that? Like, I'm curious what you think caused that. And by the way, Fox is the biggest news network, and it's very conservative, to the point of being disinformation, which they admitted themselves, quite frankly. But I'm curious what you think. If you didn't think that my presentation covered it, what do you think was the reason Trump got elected?
For me, and what I'm just saying in general, a lot of the moderates that I follow, independent journalists and whatnot, are just like ringing the bell saying, we're moving to the right because the left is so certain, that blinding moral certainty that they're, but like that framing, that the gaslighting, you know, that all Trump supporters are racist, like just the you know,
No one said that, by the
transphobic.
way. I never said that.
No,
I just
you
said,
did.
no,
The
I
way you
didn't. I
framed this
didn't.
whole discussion.
No, I didn't. I said,
You have a presentation
I
about it.
said some Trump supporters who I have met are racist. And when I asked them, is the reason you voted for Trump because he was racist and made you feel good about yourself? They said yes. So that's why I said it, because Trump supporters told me that, not because I'm gaslighting them. That was
Okay, what
Trump
I'm
supporters
saying is
told me
that
personally.
it's the moderates who swung the vote for Trump in 2016, who wanted to try something different. And I'm just saying, like, it's going to happen again if progressives don't learn the lesson. Like,
Yeah,
it is
so
what
what
it
is the
is.
reason, that you think Trump got elected?
I think it's that general gaslighting by the left. You can't use Fox. They don't have as much power as and as much reach as they do have power. They don't have as much reach as the huge swath of everyone else is batting for the left and omitting all kinds of facts. And you know, we're living in a time of narrative warfare, and Trump would just stood up and said, enough of that. And I think that's generally speaking why he got in. And I yield my time because other people want to speak.
Yeah, and Fox, just so you know, as of September 2021, Fox is the largest network in the US. But Ginny, go ahead. You have your hand up next.
Okay, just want to say, first of all, thank you for this meeting. I think you're so wise and smart at the same time. I'm also not a Trump supporter, clearly. His life is based on dishonesty, and I find that very, very appalling. And I want to thank you for what Richard Goldman said. I agree with what he said, and I think he made some really good comments. I thank him for that. And I thank you for keeping your link same. Otherwise, I would not have been able to come into your meeting. I don't know why I couldn't find your confirmation, and I happened to have found your link in my old email under your folder. So thank you for that as well.
Same bat time, same bat link, Jenny.
It always stays the same.
Mm-hmm.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And I think this is such a wonderful, very important topic. And I again thank you for the meeting.
Thanks for coming. Rose, go ahead.
Thank you. I have a lot to say, but I'll try to keep it short.
Thank you.
So just first of all wanted to disagree with the lady earlier who said that we can't elect a woman because most of some countries are sexist against women. I think that's ridiculous. I think that the reason why we should elect a woman, it has nothing to do with her being a woman. I think that if you elect someone, it's based on competencies, not about their gender. I don't think Hillary being a woman is the reason why she lost. I think that's disingenuous to say that. I think that yes, everybody should run. Whether you're a man or woman, we should have equal opportunity to run, and let the voters decide based on your credentials, not necessarily based on your sex. But I wanted to emphasize this final point, which is that. When people say, when people try to understand the mentality of the Trump supporter or the Trump voter, that doesn't necessarily mean they agree with them. It's just like you're putting yourself in the mindset of somebody you disagree with, but then at the same time, you try to empathize and say, okay, why would somebody be compelled to do something like that? Why would somebody want to vote for somebody like Trump, right? That's separate than saying you agree with their ideologies or stuff like that. So I just wanted to make that very clear. I also wanted to agree with what Bart actually said, because yes, there is a lot of the gaslighting, because the way that the media frames like the right is like they just see them as like ridiculous, out there, conspiracy theorists, like as if they have nothing valid to say, as if their ideas are worthless and stuff like that. That's how the framing is often in the left leaning media, and I think that's very dangerous, because then you're going to radicalize them even more by not trying to understand them, by not trying to give them, and yes, this whole like, oh, Fox News is a big media company. That's because it's concentrated, whereas the left leaning media is like, there's so many of them. There's like NBC, ABC, CBS, like all of those things. So the audience is spread out, versus Fox News is like more concentrated. Yes, they traffic in conspiracies and lies and stuff like that. That's obvious. But I'm saying, like, let's not be like them. Let's be better. Let's elevate the conversation. Let's have nuance. That's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Yep. So Barbara, go ahead, and then I'm gonna give a quick demo of the online community, and then we'll wrap up.
Well, the question was, why would anybody vote for Trump? I happen to know somebody who did, and his reasons. He felt that we were too eager to have wars all over, and he felt that Trump's relationship with Putin and some of these difficult dictators, that we wouldn't get into conflict with Putin. And in fact, I know that Trump said that we didn't need NATO and things like that. And I just wonder if this thing in Ukraine, I wonder, would this thing in Ukraine be happening under Trump's watch? Not that I like Trump, but he seemed to be different, and people just thought everything so bad under these these East Coast Ivy League presidents, and here's somebody who just calls it as he thinks it. And that's the way, a lot of people in the world act, I guess, in the South, and, the rednecks and all. So he appealed to this, just say what you feel like. But anyway, I think that somebody was quite intelligent. He felt that Trump would not get into conflict with Putin, and that was important. And so he was going to vote for Trump for that reason.
Great. Well, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I think that, given that Putin did, like Trump did basically ask Putin to dig up dirt on, like he indirectly asked Putin to dig up dirt on Hillary, and the intelligence community did say that there's a high degree of certainty that they did do that. They hacked one of Hillary's commanders, basically. Not Hillary herself, but one of the people in her organization. It seems like they were allied, but there are lots of other people to get into war with other than Putin. But I will say Trump didn't start a war, which is to his credit. I think actually if Trump had started a war, he probably would have been reelected, because wartime presidents are almost always reelected. And I thought there was actually a high likelihood that he would start a war, and to his credit, he didn't. So I think that's definitely to his credit. That said, I do want to give a quick introduction to the online community, which is done through software called Discord. It's like a free version of Slack that lets you do multiple, chats, and like text chat, voice chat, video chat, screen shares, everything. And so I'm going to give a quick demo. Let me share my screen. So this is the Freethinker Institute server. So it's got this is our emblem. And so in general, you'll see new people join here. And if you go to freethinkerinstitute.org, you'll be able to join the online community. There's a little link there. And these are all the sort of discussion topics that you can talk about. And if you click on these are called channels, like the kind of categories or groupings. If you click on that, you'll only see the ones that have new information since the last time you joined. And that'll, there's a lot of different channels, but if you click on these sections, then you see fewer things, and it's a little bit easier to just catch up on what's happened since the last time you came. And then people can actually you can mention individuals, like if you reply to someone, like if I want to reply here, I can reply to Ellie and say, agree, welcome to everyone. And then that will make one of these little red numbers appear for Ellie. And so if I go to the OpenAI Discord server under announcements, they've mentioned everybody in the server. And so I can click here and you can see that, I was mentioned. Everyone here means that I was mentioned amongst everyone else in the server. But you can also be mentioned specifically. And so the little red dot means that someone has actually mentioned you in one way, shape, or form. And we have a lot of different topics that you can talk about, and you can go to general if you want to talk about something that doesn't have another place to talk about it. And it's just a way to have intellectual conversation with like-minded people or differently minded people. Part of being part of the Freethinker Institute is to have interaction with different people with different opinions and to learn from them. And really, I like to encourage everyone to do what I call listening to understand, which means when you hear someone who has an idea that you think is just out there and crazy, ask them why they think that. Don't tell them why they're wrong, right? We can all tell other people why they're wrong, why we think they're wrong, but you're not going to learn that way. What you're going to learn from is understanding why do they think what they think? How did they come to their conclusion? And really empathize with them and try to understand how did they come to that opinion? And, I've tried to do that tonight. I encourage everyone to try to do that all the time. The more we can learn from other people, the more we can empathize with them, and we can ask them questions to try to understand where they're coming from. And if they don't have good answers, they'll probably change their own mind. More likely they're going to change their own mind by asking themselves questions that we've kind of seeded in their mind, rather than us telling them that they're wrong. When we tell people they're wrong, they're unlikely to change their mind. No one likes to be told they're wrong. Very few of us do. Like, I usually don't mind. Like, a lot of people told me I was wrong tonight, and I was okay with that. Like, a lot of people had good points of things that I missed in my presentation. Fine with that. Like, that's how we learn, is by learning where we're wrong and being open to being wrong. And so I just want to encourage everyone to always listen with an open mind. It's the #2 intention of the Freethinker Institute, is to transparently share your beliefs to the extent that you trust someone, and then to listen to it with an open mind towards how you can be the best version of yourself, seek truth, and be fair. And if we all do that, we'll keep moving in the right direction. And so that's all I want to do, is encourage people to do that, is keep moving in the right direction and learning from each other. And so I want to thank you all for coming tonight and doing just that this evening, and for all of your contributions and comments and thoughtful inquiries and differing opinions. And we had a wide variety of opinions here, from communism to Trump supporter to Democratic supporter, and I'm an independent somewhere in the middle. So neither the Democrats or the Republicans like me, because I don't agree with any of them all of the time. And that said, I do really appreciate learning from everyone at these events, and I hope you all have a great rest of your night, and hope to see you all next week and in future events. And so thanks a lot, everyone, and thanks for coming. Bye-bye.